Greetings and welcome back to the Protecting Veil YouTube channel. I was grateful for a second opportunity to speak with acclaimed Orthodox Christian cultural critic, novelist, gentleman farmer, and essayist Paul Kingsnorth. This interview in many ways acts as a bridge between this channel and the new channel I just launched. Speaking of which, if you haven't already checked out the new channel, please do so now by clicking here. As you may know, Paul talks a lot about our contemporary machine culture and the influence of technology on our lives. My new channel is called You Are Not a Machine, and I will be addressing similar topics there. I'm going to release half of this interview on this channel and the other half on the new channel, so please subscribe to both. There are links below this video where you can do that. So without further ado, here is part of my latest interview with Paul Kingsnorth. Can you speak a bit more about your time in Romania? And then you said you were also on Mount Athos. What were some of the main takeaways, in addition to the things you've already spoken about? Were there other things that you took from your experiences on pilgrimage?
Yeah, well, as you know, when you go to these Orthodox countries, and you'll know this better than me if you've lived there for a long time, as you say, there's a real depth of tradition there that we just don't have in the West. I mean, even here in Europe, I mean, I come from England and I live in Ireland, and these are countries with very old Christian traditions, of course, but they're very Christianity is very worn down here and very secularized. And even though if you come from England, as I do, the place is absolutely full of beautiful old churches and old cathedrals and wonderful old Christian monuments, and almost all of them are empty most of the time, if the Church of England hasn't turned them into theme parks, which it literally has for some of them, or sold them off for flats, or worship for other religions. And so you've got a Christian heritage in certainly where I come from that looks increasingly just like a museum piece. And here in Ireland, you've got a different problem. You had a Catholic Church that was quite repressive in a lot of ways, and people have had a real rebellion against that. And so people in Ireland have almost thrown their Christian heritage away in just a few decades. So there's a bit of a spiritual void. So it's interesting that in the West, we have a very old Christian heritage, but it doesn't feel alive, at least not where I come from or live in. But when I go to Romania, it does. When I go to Athos, obviously it does. Now, I have obviously Romanian friends in the church, and they'll say, oh, it's not nearly as rich as it used to be, and not so many people go to the church, and the country's much more secular, all of which I'm sure is true. But still, you can go around Romania and you can visit dozens, if not hundreds, of ancient monasteries. And a lot of the monks in them will be very young. Lots of 20-something guys becoming monks in these Romanian monasteries now. They're not museums with a couple of old men in. They're still alive. The tradition's still renewing itself. There are dozens and sometimes hundreds of monks and nuns in these places. And the church, although it undoubtedly has plenty of problems, feels like it's still alive. You can go to a cathedral. I went to Iași in eastern Romania to speak earlier this year, and I went to visit the cathedral. And in the cathedral, they have the relics of Saint Paraschiva, who's a very famous local saint. And the queue is almost round the block to venerate these relics. And again, it's families, it's young people, it's not just the elderly from another generation. So it's very interesting. I think going to Orthodox countries as a Christian was the first time I saw a living Christian heritage, that's still there, even if it's maybe not as strong as it used to be. I think there's some truth in the fact that in these countries, especially in Romania and Russia, because the persecution by the communists was so terrible, especially in Romania, paradoxically, that strengthened the church. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church and all that. And there's a sense that it's come through that with some strength. So, yeah, in Romania and especially in Athos, of course, I just saw a powerful living Christian heritage, and it was very, very, it was very powerful. I mean, Athos, especially, strange things happen on Athos all the time. You go there and find yourself having conversations you needed to have with people who didn't know they were going to have them with you. And you sit in front of icons and things seem to happen, and there's time seems to move at a different pace. It's a very strange and interesting place, and You know, they've been saying the liturgy there every day for 1,000 years. So that's that's the spiritual power that has. And again, there's just nothing like this in the West. We don't have anything like this as Christians. So it's and again, somewhere like Athos is very much a secret. I'd never heard of it until a few years ago. So
Yeah.
you know, there's the fact that that's still out there. We can make a pilgrimage east, I think, as Orthodox people, and drink from this very deep well.
Yeah, well, one of the things I encourage any convert that'll listen to me is, go and at least go and visit, a parish that's not your home parish. Like, go to the Greek church, go to the Russian if you're at the Greek church, go to the feast days. If you can go to a monastery close by, great. The ideal would be go to an Orthodox country, go for a week. If you can spend a year, do that. The biggest gift that I was given was one of the biggest gifts was 8 years in Greece, opportunity to learn an Orthodox a language of an Orthodox people, to be 2 hours away from Mount Athos. And that's, I mean, it's just the fastest way. Like, if you want Neo's mind, jujitsu education in Orthodoxy, the best thing you can do is just like throw yourself in and be there.
Yeah, I think so.
You just absorb it from the culture and people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, what you pick up is the phronema, isn't it? This notion of the Orthodox way of being, which I think is maybe the hardest thing for a Western person to pick up, because you can read all the theology and you can go to church and understand the liturgy and all of this, but there's a way of seeing and being that's Orthodox, which is not the same as being Catholic or Protestant or just Western generally. It's not about what you believe. It's about, as it's who you are, how you live, what your sort of relationship is to it all. And you can't read it in a book. You have to sort of watch people and go and spend time with them. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't have that going on alongside your reading, then you just end up, with an incredibly skewed idea of what Orthodoxy is. It ends up being something that's not actually Orthodoxy. It's just whatever Eastern Rite. Some people have called it Eastern Rite Protestantism, Eastern Rite Catholicism. Are there any stories that you'd like to share that were meaningful, that people would find beneficial from your pilgrimages?
So the thing about Orthodoxy, which again I've not experienced in a Western church, which is why I became Orthodox, because in a way it would make more sense for me to be Catholic or Anglican, but I'm not. And Orthodoxy is very experiential, and again, as we were saying, it's difficult to explain it, but it's extremely physical and immersive. Obviously, not least at the liturgy. The experience of being in the divine liturgy is not like any other any other Christian service I've been in any kind of church, because it doesn't feel purely intellectual. It doesn't feel purely sort of heart-based either. It's entirely physical, and the prostrations and the standing and the kissing icons and the sense of the incense and the music and all of this is a full body immersion. And so you feel like your entire self is being immersed in this. And when I was on Athos, that was particularly strong in the services. I went to a liturgy in Vatapedi Monastery, who happened to be there. I didn't even know this because Athos is on the old calendar and my church isn't, but we were coming up to the Dormition when I was in Athos, and so we extended our stay by a day or two. They gave us permission to stay longer, and we were there for the Dormition, and they had an all-night service at Vatapedi Monastery. It starts about 9, I think, and ends about 4 in the morning. And I thought, I'm just going to go to this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be proper Orthodox. I'm not going to bed. So, so I did, and it was very much a kind of out-of-body experience in a way. And so, it's a very, very old monastery. And it's a very, very old church, which is obviously huge and beautifully painted, but it also has little corridors down the side, and you can go down these corridors, and there's a huge icon of the Mother of God, which has, healing powers. There's one particularly down the corridor, the front of the church, which is called the Icon of the Mighty Protection, I think. I get my icons confused. There are so many Mother of God icons there, but I just remember sitting in front of this icon for a long time, just sort of contemplating it and being with it and not asking anything, and moving from that back into the church and then coming back out again. And it really does feel like you're in a different time zone. And that's not just, that's not a kind of physical experience of being tired or smelling incense or something like that. It's really another experience of just being on a slightly different plane of reality. And I felt that again and again, especially on Mount Athos, but I felt it in Romania as well. So you just go to these things and don't expect anything, don't ask anything particularly, and see what happens. And I've had that again and again. And it's, as I say, it's very experiential. It's very physical. It's not just a question of belief or something. And it's those are the things that for me are very foundational to my orthodoxy. More so than reading books or learning, which I have to do as well, but just the experience. And I'm always very struck by the fact that some of my favorite Orthodox saints could barely read at all. Saint Porphyrios, who's wonderful, and I know he's featured in your book. He's my favorite saint. I think he's our household saint. Actually, my family are big fans as well. But he could barely read anything when he went to Mount Athos. He had to sort of mumble his way through the Bible and couldn't read it out at the services. He'd hardly ever been to school. It becomes one of the holiest men around, and I think there's a connection to that. There's a connection. He hadn't had his mind fuddled by ideas, and so he was able to actually just walk straight towards God. So I feel like I have to remove all of the ideas from my head that I've picked up so that I can actually go and experience. And you can do that in places like Athos because that's what it's designed for. So yeah, it's a powerful thing.
Yeah, it's another one of the many challenges of a Western person coming into Orthodoxy. Probably, in a sense, less so for you because you had, in a sense, Orthodoxy was your first real Christian experience.
Yes, I don't have any other kind of Christianity to unlearn. That does help a bit.
You do, yeah, as you say, you do need to lead with the heart. Certainly, lots of people writing books and lots of.
Yeah, well, there's no contradiction, is there? It's about what you're being led by. I mean, I'm a writer, so I spend my whole life writing things. There's nothing wrong with using your brain. You have to do that, and you have to. Your mind has to always watch over your heart so that you don't get caught up in delusion and fantasy and all the other things that are quite possible to get deluded by. But at the same time, you know when what's going on in your heart or in your nous is the real thing. You can feel it, I think. And one of the things I also appreciate about Orthodoxy, this is true of the Western Church as well, there's plenty of theology and wisdom of the saints warning about spiritual delusion and telling us what it looks like, so we can keep an eye on that. It is easy, I suppose, to fall into that, but yeah. So it's the balance, really. Being led by your heart, mind, allowing your intellect to be led by that or directed by that. I mean, I'm still trying to work out how to do that. I'm not pretending I've worked it out, but I can see that that's the challenge,
Yeah. Well, going back to your analogy from Martin Shaw, being slowly lowered into the mind of Christ.
Yeah, and that's what it feels like.
Hello again. I hope you enjoyed this installment from my interview with Paul Kingsnorth. Again, please subscribe to the new channel and to this channel to be notified when new installments become available. Links below this video, and I will see you soon.